buy it, use the bank gives you all the money in addition to renovate it as well. So you put down percent of the total purchase price of the property plus whatever that renovation budget is going to be. And then when you close on the property, the seller gets the money and you get that renovation budget with your contractor, and you go and you finish that out.
What's up, folks? We've got a great episode coming at you today. Today, I've got the guy from the 203K way, and his name is Matt Porcaro. And this dude is going to tell us everything about 203K loans. This information you could use to create hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity in your next home purchase. You're going to want to sit down and take some notes on this episode. This guy's really bringing the heat. Thanks for joining us again. And before we get going, don't forget, hit the like button on the episode if this adds value for you. And don't forget to subscribe so you can catch that next episode when it comes out. My goal is to help you reach financial independence, make smart money decisions, and live life on your terms. Love you guys. Let's dive in. Matt, super excited to have this conversation with you today, man. Thanks for joining.
Glad to be here, brother. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. It's going good. Matt is the man on 203K loans and everything to do with 203K loans. And I was checking out his content recently, and I was like, we need to sit down and talk about this. And I really think this information on 203K loans is really going to help a lot of you out there that are considering this or didn't even know about this as an option to build your real estate portfolio. This is kind of a sneaky way and a really smart way to get into a really great deal. So Matt, just give us the 30-second rundown on you and where you're located, how you figured out this 203K process, and then let's dive into the nuts and bolts of how this works.
Yeah, man. Well, great intro to that. And I guess I'll preface it by saying it'd be really tough to cram into 30 seconds because the way I found myself here, I think it's a great actual point, though. The way I found myself here was actually by just trying and failing at every other strategy, right?
Yeah.
So that really, in short, is my story of I came from New York. I'm born and raised, actually, I'm still here. And getting into real estate investing in a market like New York is very difficult. And these days it's difficult everywhere, right? We're seeing housing prices completely just go out of any price range that we ever thought it would go. Rates we thought were going to go down. They told us they were going to go down. They're not going down. So it's just haywire out there right now. So really my whole platform in the 203K way and why I became so involved in this is because I was the guy that always knew that there was a better way or there had to be another way out there. And I was just tirelessly looking for my avenue into real estate investing. I was born and raised very blue collar. My parents had their own business, struggled financially over the years, and finances for me were just from a very young age, the root of all evil and happiness in my family. So from a young age, I really knew that I wanted to do something right with money, but I didn't know what that was. My parents owning their own business told me, go to school, get a good job, because to them, a consistent paycheck every week was the ideal scenario. Going to college, getting a degree, going and working in New York City, which is where I worked, that is the idea. And I basically went and did that because I was told that that's the thing to do, and got into it, did the thing, went to school for electrical engineering. By the grace of God, got out in 4 years. That was a tough run. But the reason I got into it was literally because my guidance counselor said it would be to make the most money. So you could kind of see the theme here. But essentially, I got into the workforce, and very quickly getting into the workforce, realized that this wasn't really how people got rich either. I'm like, wait, no matter how hard I work, the paycheck's the same every week. And fast forward, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I call the red pill for a kid like me growing up in an environment where the word investing never came up ever. Money went out as fast as it came in most cases faster than how it came in. So that changed it for me. So, when I read the book, I realized that I wanted to get out of the W-2 or find some other resources to increase my income. And again, real estate always seemed so far and out of reach in New York, but I tried so many different strategies and, tried so many different things over the course of so many years. And eventually, by really just pigging through my environment, was introduced into the 203K loan, which obviously I could share more about. And I know you have a lot of questions about, but ultimately, that's what leveraged me into real estate with very, very little out of pocket, grew my net worth very quickly, and really was the only option that was able for me to afford a property in New York and ultimately
Yeah.
start my journey.
Sweet. I love it. I love it. You sound like you started off kind of like me. I started off in the corporate world
Mhm.
and then just gradually moved over to real estate as I got more and more tired of the stuff I had to deal with over there. So,
It's a lot of
tell
people's
us.
story, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like when you discover the financial freedom that's available with real estate, you're like, wow, I can run my own business. I can have flexibility of time. I can build wealth and I can do it on my own terms. That's really attractive, of course. So let's talk about what is a 203K loan?
Sure. $1 million question, right? So
Yeah.
the 203K loan is an FHA loan program. So if you're familiar with FHA, it's like the federally backed housing program, and similar to FHA, it's an owner occupant loan, right? So they require you to live in the property or at least make it your primary residence for at least a year after the closing date. That's the rule. But ultimately, the whole point of the program is to give more people the ability to get into housing. And the way they do that is by requiring only 3.5% down of your total purchase price of your property. They require very low credit score, 580. They need 2 years of tax returns, very favorable debt to income ratios, and a little lower interest rate than your other mortgages. Now, the 203K version of that is a version that allows you to wrap the renovation costs if you buy a if you buy a fixer upper property. uh, it allows you to wrap all that budget into the mortgage. So if you're a real estate investor, and what I was doing all those years trying to get into real estate investing was learning about the benefits of value add investing, which is essentially like looking for a fixer upper, building equity into it, and then, doing, the burr strategy, of course, or like just building value into the home, and then having that value, having that net worth, that equity, and using that again and going and building your portfolio that way. So when I had heard about it from the first time, it was from a mentor of mine in a local RIA group. She was like, she was a very experienced real estate investor. And I took her to the side one day and I asked her, I was like, her name was Melissa. I was like, hey, Melissa, if you could go back and like do this all over again, like I'm just starting out, I'm really struggling. It's New York. It's expensive here. Like I don't have tons of money in my bank account. I got like 10 grand in the bank. Like, what would you do? Like the wholesale? She's like, I didn't do it starting out, but if I could go back in time and do it, this is absolutely the cheat code to get into the game. And that's by using the FHA 203K loan. She knew that I didn't really have my own primary residence at the time. So this is always the kicker. This is what a lot of people get caught up on. But at the end of the day, this is an avenue for people starting out, or this isn't for everybody, but I do think everybody should do it. So she said, use this FHA 203K loan. They're going to allow you to buy a fixer upper property, any type of, it could be any condition. It could be falling into itself, whatever. It could be not too bad. There's no, condition requirement. Buy it, use the bank. The bank gives you all the money in addition to renovate it as well. So you put down 3.5% of the total purchase price of the property, plus whatever that renovation budget is going to be. And
Yeah.
then when you close on the property, the seller gets the money and you get that renovation budget with your contractor, and you go and you finish that out. Now, all you need to give in exchange of that is just 3.5%. So what you can do, and if you play your cards right, is you buy a good deal, you finance all the renovation, all that stuff, and then you go and you take that equity and you go buy more. Here in New York, I was living in where I live, there's a lot of basement apartments, right? So before all the ADU craze and everything like that, like that's really the only way people were affording mortgages here in New York. So she told me, she said, hey, listen, while you do this, look for one of these fixer upper properties, live down in the basement, rent out the upstairs, house hack, right?
Yeah.
Get your mortgage paid for or close to it, live there, you're fulfilling the occupancy requirements. And then when you're done with the year, move out, do it all over again, pull the equity out and do it all over again. So that's what I went out and tried to do and went to go find. But because kind of what we were talking about, I went out there and realized there wasn't much information about the 203K loan. It's for a number of reasons, which I've come to understand over the years. But ultimately she basically gave me the golden key, because this was the only feasible thing. Like 3.5% down was pretty much what I had. Like that was all I had, and that was my only option. But again, it didn't require me to use anyone else's money except the banks and the government, government backing it. Didn't require any other experience, didn't require anything. It's something that I can get in. It was basically like a fix and flip on training wheels.
Awesome. A lot of good stuff to unpack there. One thing I wanted to ask you before I dive into my next question is, you said refinance and do it again. Can you do two 203K loans, or is it only for first time home buyers?
Yeah, so it's like probably the main question I get asked. And
Okay.
what's wild is the guidelines in the last year have changed tremendously,
Okay.
for a number of different reasons. But the guidelines on these programs have gotten even more forgiving, really, because people are becoming more and more frustrated with home buying, and they're trying to open up the floodgates a little more for people that are starting out. So great question. So the question is, can you repeat it? Short answer, yes. If you asked me about a year or two ago if you should repeat it, I would tell you probably not, just because what it did for me. So just to dial back to my deal a little bit, like I went out there and I started like hounding this thing. I got connected with a lender who really didn't know how to do it, which I found out the hard way, but it was the only one that I knew and trusted. And I just started placing offers. And, one of the things that people leave out all the time in their story is like, listen, it wasn't easy for me, right? Like I was placing lots of offers. I was getting laughed at, rejected. Good luck, kid. You're never going to find anything in New York for that price. And as I was offering and offering, I stumbled upon a one that was out of my price range, but it was a really beat up crack house duplex property. And my lender was like, "Oh, go offer on that." And I was like, "Well, no, I'm only at the time was pre-approved for like 280,000 or something like that, like which really buys you pretty much nothing in New York. You can't even buy land for that. But it was pretty much falling down. And I'm like, I can't afford this. He said, well, no. And this is one of the key kickers of this program is it allows you to buy multifamily properties, right? So I was able to get into this and buy this multifamily property. And with that multifamily property, I'm able to forecast the future rental income of the other unit. What that did for me was that increased the ability of my buying power to get more. So on average, for every $1,500 in rent that you would get from other units in a multi-unit property on one of these mortgages, like an FHA 203K, you get another almost $100,000 in buying power, which is huge, right? For me, that was like what got me over the edge, and that's exactly what it did. It pretty much gave me that hundred grand that I needed, got me to a 350 loan amount, and I ended up picking up the property, bought it for 280,000, put 80,000 into it. 270, put 80,000 as the renovation budget. I was all into the property for 350,000. When it was done, I knew it was going to be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of the 400 range. It came back reappraised at 480. So I had built, $130,000 in equity in 8 months, and I had only put down $9,500. So this was very quick equity, and not to mention, I was living in one unit, renting out the other unit, and that other unit was pretty much covering my mortgage. So I was effectively living for free. Now, to answer your question and why I tell you this is in the past, that's what it did for me was, okay, now I had equity. Now I had cash flow. With that equity, I went and I used other financing options because I also had experience. So I went the hard money route and the private money route. And that was one direction that I went in. And the reason being is because it was faster. Now, you can refinance and you can go and get another FHA loan. The rule is that you're only allowed to have one FHA loan under your name at any given time, unless you move over like a certain mileage amount, life change, or anything like that. But here's the kicker, and here's what I was alluding to before with the changes. Fannie Mae entered the mix last year on allowing you to buy multifamily properties with a low down payment as well. Previous to November of last year, you could only buy multifamily up to 4 unit properties with an FHA loan. And, the idea of like house hacking into multiple multifamily properties was really hard. Like it was doable, but it was very difficult. Fannie Mae entered the mix and said, hey, we're going to let you also buy 4 unit properties. and we're going to only require 5% down. Little more than 3.5, but it's basically the same thing. And the thing is, too, is they also have a renovation program, and it's called the home style loan. It's the exact same thing as the 203K. It acts the same way. It's just their version. Now, the cool thing is the Fannie Mae doesn't really have a limit. It's 11 is really the limit. You're allowed to have 11 Fannie Mae mortgages under your name at any given time. So you're able to take this, you're able to do the 203K, then you can go onto the Fannie Mae side, which is the exact same thing, and keep buying multiple multifamily properties with no guideline restrictions as long as you can afford them.
So to make sure I'm tracking with this, you can do your 203K loan. If you refi that out into a conventional loan, can you go do another 203K loan, or is it
Yep,
just an FHA loan? Because I know that 203K loans are a type of FHA loan,
correct.
correct?
Yep.
So is it you can only have one going at a time, or is it only for first time home buyers?
Only one going at a time. It's
Gotcha.
the common misconception is that these programs, these low down payment programs, are first time home buyer. They're not. They're owner occupant, right? So there just means they pretty much the guidelines across the board are that you intend for it to be your primary residence for at least a year after the closing date.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is a really, really smart way to get your real estate investing portfolio started, to build up equity, to use the bank money to do your renovation. And like you said, this gave you more capital for your first property. You were qualified for 250 or whatever it was, 280, 275. You were able to get 80 more from the bank for the repairs, and then that created that massive amount of equity there. You said you were required to live there for a year. Is there pretty much the expectation that you can't refi that for a year as well? Or what's the seasoning period on the refi if you wanted to refi and do it again?
Yeah, great question. So, again, these days you don't have to refi just because of the Fannie Mae thing. But if speaking specifically to the 203K,
Yeah.
usually banks like to see 6 months of a seasoning period.
Okay.
What I like to tell people is obviously depending on the size of the renovation you're doing, right? My renovation took all of 8 months, so it was that's a whole story in and of itself. But it got through, and at the end of the day, I pretty much made every mistake that you possibly could on a 203K loan when I did mine, but would go back and do it in a heartbeat, which I did. I remember vividly being done with it and going through all the craziness and having it take 8 months and just being like, why do more people not know about this? Even through the sucky parts, even because it was like I put so little down. Like it was so hard to lose. It taught me so much. Again, it was like it's such a low risk option. And even despite all the stuff, like real estate agents, like their biggest remark is like, oh, that's too much paperwork. I don't know. There's not a stack of paperwork in the world that you could give me that I would not fill out if you could told me I could turn $9,500 into over six figures of equity in 8 months. I'll fill out the biggest stack of paperwork. But to answer your question, right? Like it's the idea here is that um when you go and when you go and repeat the process, like at the end of the day, like the bank is just looking for you to make everything to make sense from guidelines perspective, right? You refinance out. One of the beauties is if you play this the right way, you're also going to create enough equity to get rid of the PMI, right? So PMI is the mortgage insurance that you pay. It's the little additional amount. It's usually a couple $100 a month. FHA has it's like 0.55 of the total loan amount every year, equates to a couple $100. What it means to someone just thinking about this that doesn't really know what it is, essentially it's your fee that you're paying to the government in effect to not have to put a full 20% down payment. It's your
Yeah.
fee you pay every month for being a subprime borrower. So when you refinance out and you have 20% equity in the property, you also could get rid of that mortgage insurance, giving you an extra cash flow back to your pocket every month. So
I love it. Yeah, I love creative ways to create equity in deals and create deals. And this is like a house hacker's this is like gasoline for the house hacking fire,
oh,
because this is
100%. Yeah.
Because FHA loans, you can put 3.5% down on an FHA loan, but a traditional FHA loan is not going to give you the money to go renovate the property.
No.
And then on the appraisal, putting on my appraiser hat here, on the appraisal, there's all these things you gotta you got to get right before the closing, right? The appraisals on FHA and the inspections for FHA are more challenging to close on because of all these things that FHA requires. When you're doing a 203K loan, which is a type of FHA loan, this is a property that's going to be renovated, so you don't have those same requirements, correct?
Exactly. You
Yeah.
you literally nailed it, right? So for the house hacking community, and I see it a lot out there on like, on the different forums and Facebook groups and stuff like that. I mean, the issues that these house hackers are having is that they're running into issues that every issue that they run into is solvable with the 203K, right?
Yeah.
First being, I mean, I can't tell you how many, it seems like it's been more and more and more lately. I think so many people got obsessed with getting a multifamily property and becoming a landlord that they forgot that the point of it is to make money and make a good financial decision. And what happened was, to your point, right? With an FHA loan, they have really stringent inspection and appraisal requirements.
Yeah.
So these people are usually overpaying for a property because there's a lot of competition on multifamily, especially move-in ready, which it has to be because it's an FHA loan. So they're going all into a property. They have no equity, or some cases negative equity. Now they have tenants. Now they're saving a little money. Maybe they're not. In a lot of cases, they're not. And then the tenant has issues, and they don't have free liquid capital to take care of those issues. So now they're using credit cards, they're paying money out of pocket. And I've read so many stories of people being like, we got into house hacking to get into real estate investing, and we're in this property and we're stuck. We have
Mhm.
no equity, we have no free cash flow, we're paying out of pocket for repairs, and now we have no next step. And this strategy solves that. It
Yeah.
creates equity, number one, which gives you the ability to retap that, go buy more real estate with. That's the first thing. Number two, ideally, you're getting something at a lower cost basis. So you're getting something for a better deal. So you're building equity into it. You have a lower monthly payment than someone that's in something move in ready. So your cash flow is more likely and frees up a bit more, right? And
Yeah.
then most importantly, you're not running into the same restrictions that you would on the appraisals and inspections and all those things, because you can close on the property as is. It doesn't matter what the condition is. You're closing subject to that you're going to repair it all with the renovation budget they give you.
I love it. So let's talk about some nuances to this that people would have questions on, and that I would have a question on if I were looking at doing this myself. I'm going to say I'm thinking about using this strategy on my next purchase.
Yeah.
Can I use a 203K loan if I currently have a primary residence on a conventional loan?
So it's a great question. As long as you're willing to move out and move into the new property, of course.
Okay.
Again, the only rule here is owner occupancy. Now, there are versions of the loan, there of the Fannie Mae loan that don't require homeowner occupancy. That is the Fannie Mae Home Style investor loan. That's 15% down. So not as ideal. But what it does, though, is it still allows you to wrap the renovation costs into the loan. And it's different than like a DSCR loan or a hard money loan, because it still is based on you, and it's not an asset based lending tool. So essentially what that means is like, if it's not the best deal on the planet, but it's a property that you still like, you can get it. And if you make income on your business or your W 2, whatever it is, they'll also take that income and combine it with whatever the future income of that property is and get you in. A lot of people are doing this for like Airbnbs and short term, midterm rental type scenarios, because again, you're getting all the money. To renovate it, all the money to purchase it, and you're putting 15% down. Now you compare that to hard money or a DSCR loan, that's probably 10% less than what they're looking for. And you don't have as strict of the guidelines on like on the DSCR kind of model, and the requirements on cash flow and stuff like that.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so if I'm currently living in my primary residence and I
Hmm.
decide I'm going to use a 203K loan on my next home, I find a distressed property. I'm like, this one's perfect. I like this house. I want to renovate this. I use this 3.5% down. What are the limitations with the purchase price and the renovation budget? And what kind of renovations can I do? Is it like you can't add square footage? Like, how far can you go with this reno?
Yeah, so great question, and the quick answer is it's unlimited in what you can do, really. There's no condition requirement of the next property. It could be anything from a foundation in the ground and nothing on top of it to a completely move-in ready house that you just want to renovate the kitchens and baths. The limitation is that it's based off of the FHA loan limit, number one, and obviously what you could be approved for. Your loan amount is any total of those. Let's just say, for example, using an easy number, you're approved for $100,000 loan with the FHA. Okay. Again, easy number. Um, let's say you buy the property for $50,000. You can have a $50,000 renovation budget, right? You could buy the house for $10,000 and have an $80,000 renovation budget. Any combination of that just needs to fit within that total loan amount umbrella. Um, the FHA loan limits, that goes by county. In many counties, especially high cost of living areas, like the budgets are high. In many cases, the people's like income is what's limiting them, not the limit. But you will see some cases like here in New York, a single family FHA loan, you get 1.2 million is the limit, and then on a quadplex, it's like 2.4 million. Obviously, New York is a very high cost of living area, but in some of the lower cost of living areas, you see like 500,000, 700 to 600,000 with single family, that type of thing. So no limitation on what you can do. I mean, the only limitations are like it has to be it has to be inherent to the property. Like you can't like go and build like a pool house and like a whole like basketball court, something like that. Now the Fannie Mae home style you can. Again, it's really the same loan product. If we're talking two options of the same thing. When I say 203K these days, it's really just like the short name for saying renovation loan. People just it's like the Kleenex of renovation loans. People just know like that as the only brand. But there are multiple brands. So for you in your case, if you wanted to go do it, again, you can do what you want. You could add square footage. Me and my wife are doing it right now on our forever home. We're using the Fannie Mae home style. I mean, we're doing exactly what we want. We just had to conform within the loan limit. That was it.
Can you do this on new construction?
Great question. So the answer is no. You can't do there has to be some existing structure of some kind. You can't build on new land. FHA does have a program that is a new construction loan program. I have never, and I know a lot of people in this industry, especially the construction lending, renovation lending industry. I
Yeah.
don't know anybody that's done it, but it does exist if you look it up. The problem with new construction and stuff like that is there's so many additional fees that people forget about with new construction, with in terms of like, and especially depending on what type of city or jurisdiction you're in. I
Yeah.
mean, between the utilities and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, the town requirements, like, like
The
roads and
zoning and that kind of stuff.
yeah, the rezone, like there's so much that goes into that, right?
Yeah.
So, they figure for like the average person, like that's a lot to take on, especially if you've never done it before. But it does
Yeah.
exist. So I can't speak on it, but it's out there. But you can literally take a house, demolish it, leave the foundation, and rebuild on top of it. As long as it fits
Hmm.
your budget and fits your loan amount, you could absolutely do something like that.
You said the loan amount in New York is 1.2 million. I'm assuming that is purchase price plus renovations all in. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep. So the loan limit is the combination of the two.
Nice.
Also, depending on the size of the renovation, the bank will also require you to put a 10% contingency on the renovation number. So the way the process goes, just to go over it really quick, because people might be wondering. So what happens is you find a house, put it under contract, it needs renovation, right? The first thing you do is you're going to bring out someone called a 203K consultant. Now, prior to all of this, you're going to get a good 203K loan lender, one that's very experienced with this. This is what that's the if you could tell me where most people mess up with this is they work with a lender that either has no business doing it or doesn't have enough business doing it. You want to work with a lender that is an expert on these. Multiple different ways to find them. Shameless plug. I'm connected with pretty much all of them in the country. The 203kway.com/lender. Go there. It'll put you in connection with an experienced lender that will handle that part of the market. But that's the first thing. Once you have that pre-approval, you shop around, you find a fixer upper, you get it under contract. The first thing that should happen is that you go out there with what's called a 203K consultant, which basically just takes place of the home inspector. They're the same thing. In many cases, they are home inspectors. They just have this 203K consultant hat that they also wear. What they do is they do go and inspect the property, see what's wrong with it. And then they work with you to come up with what you want to do to the property. So they build what's called an SOR report, a schedule of repairs. That schedule of repairs is a line item scope of work of what needs to be done to the property to get it up to code and spec and inspection, everything like that. And then what you want to do to the property. The consultant is also supposed to give you a rough order of magnitude estimate of what they think the cost will be worth. So then you know if this is feasible or not. Then once you have that, you bring it to your contractor or contractors, which I recommend. You get multiple bids. The contractors fill out their bids. You compare apples to apples. Okay, everything looks good. You pick your contractor. That money goes into that goes to the bank. And again, they give you that 10% contingency on top of that contractor bid, or it could go up to 15% on a much bigger mortgage. So what we like to say is when you do that, you always want to figure for the contingency. If I know you're probably familiar with renovation and stuff like that, like you're always going to use that contingency. It's never face value, and it's a healthy thing to get people to start thinking about because they're not a special case. I'm doing it on my own house. I have a background in construction. We're still tapping contingency.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay. Well, to piggyback on what you just said, how long does this process normally take? Let's say for an average renovation. I know it depends on the scope of work. Let's say you just have an average, $30,000 reno on a single family, one story, 3-bedroom house. Does it, what should people expect as far as complying with all the 203K requirements, the different inspections and the draws and that kind of thing? What does this normally take time wise?
Yeah, I mean, so like people love to listen. I understand why they do it, right? Because I always make the comparison. Okay, if you have a Porsche, right, and you need to get an oil change, and you want to get your tires rotated. Do you bring it to a Porsche dealership and have a Porsche mechanic work on it, or do you bring it to a Honda dealership and have a Honda mechanic work on it? Now, you could probably get both mechanics to work on it. Would you agree? Right? Like
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
Honda mechanic can probably change your oil. They probably can rotate tires. A car is a car. But would you rather them be used to working on a Porsche? I work on Porsches all day, every day, right? That's what I want to do. I want the person that works on Porsches all the day, every day to
Yeah.
work on my Porsche, right?
Sure.
With the 203K, why it has a bad rap sometimes is because people end up doing it that don't really do it often and they don't give it the respect it deserves. And what happens is when in those types of scenarios, of course, the wheels fall off, pun intended, right? Like you get into these scenarios where but the reality is that it does not be it does not, when you know what you're doing, it does not constitute a slower transaction. It does not constitute slower renovation. It's literally how construction's supposed to be done. When I worked in New York City, when I worked as an electrical engineer as in design build, I did all the large construction in New York City over the last like decade. Um, every single project is run in the exact same way. And it's pretty much exactly the way the 203K loan is built in terms of the guidelines and the process, right? You get a scope of work, you go to your contractor, you get the bids in, you qualify the bids, you close, you hire them, you get started, you pay them as they continue through the process. It's clear cut. So there's no expected difference in timeline as long as you know what you're doing. To be clear on that, right? Like once I started to know what I'm doing, I realized that it doesn't need to be anything more complicated. My first 203K loan, where I had no idea what I was doing, nor did anybody else in my circle know what they were doing, it took 120 something days to close. All right. Very long time, game breaking in a lot of places, but we were able to close. My property that me and my wife bought using the home style loan, we closed in 38 days. And that's a $200,000 renovation. So the idea is like it doesn't slow anything down. The inspections don't really slow anything down. The consultants usually could be out there in a day, get your contractor paid in a day or two. Again, though, if it's a consultant that isn't experienced with it, a contractor that's not experienced with it, or the contractor actually doesn't really need to be experienced with it, but like this can be done really quickly and really simply.
So on your example of it taking 120 days to close, was that including your renovations being completed, or was
Uh,
that
no,
just
that was before the
estimate?
renovation starting. Yeah. So
Gotcha.
so no renovation has to start until you close, right? So like
Gotcha.
it works exactly like hard money. If anyone, if you're familiar with hard money, anyone listening to hard money is like they give you the money to buy it, they give you the money to renovate it. And what happens is you tell them how much money you need to renovate, you close on the property, the seller that sold you the property gets their portion, and then your part, which is the renovation part, gets thrown in a bank account, and then you draw down from that bank account as you continue through the process.
Does the draw process work the same way here? Is it they're putting money in an account that you can use, or are you having to pay for it out of pocket and doing a reimbursement?
I've been getting that question a lot lately. I'm actually surprised on how many people lay out out of pocket. No, you're not required to lay anything out of pocket. Another common misconception with this program is that the contractor can't get any startup capital. Um, while I will say that in the professional construction world, that is the case, and they do that on purpose. The reason they do that on purpose is because I grew up in the industry. My dad was a contractor. We fell on many hard times over the years. My dad's business was very sensitive to whatever the market was doing. 2008, early 2000s, late 90s. I mean, I remember all of it, and it was rough times. My dad going months and months at a time without working, and he would finally get a job, right? He would finally get a job, and he would get a deposit. That deposit honestly did not go to materials and paying the guys sometimes. It just didn't. I love my dad to death, and I know that he had to do what he had to do, and he always made good on it. He has a great reputation, but the money didn't go to the project. He was desperate for that cash and it went elsewhere. Now, again, he made good on it and he knew that he was, but every contractor's not like that. You have how many times you hear the horror stories of people running away, contractors ran away with my money because you pay them so much up front and they don't know how to manage the money well. So the common misconception is that they don't give you any startup capital. Now, when you work with a good lender, they will, assuming the contractor's good and reputable, they'll give you money to start up material, stuff like that, just to get the ball rolling. But no, as you go through the process, the draw comes. And then just as if you and I were going to write out a check to our contractor when we're done with our renovation or done with a portion of the renovation, they will go verify the work's been done and just check it off on a box, send it to the bank, and the bank overnights them a check directly to the contractor. So the contractor gets paid directly.
Yeah, I like that. That keeps you from having to pay out of pocket and things going sideways that way.
100%. And the 203K consultant, I always like to tell people, like, people get mixed up on what their role is. And of course there's good ones and bad ones, but they're not your project manager. They're not running the project for you by any means. That's up to you. But like keeping tabs on your contractor, but they are a neutral third party that effectively acts as like a referee on this. So think of it this way, like, people go out there all the time and go and renovate their own house and sign a contract with a contractor for $50,000+, $100,000. They have no scope of work. They have no timeline. They have no one out there to call balls and strikes. What about having someone there that's just another set of eyes, a third set of eyes that can mediate and call balls and strikes on like what's actually happening on a project? It's like when
Yeah.
people talk about things that every what I find is like every person's complaint with this product, and I want to finish this thought, but everyone's complaints with this product are that, oh, you have to get a consultant involved. Oh, you have to get more paperwork. It's like, this is the stuff that's there to ensure that you don't lose your shirt. Like, why is this a problem? Like, The reason everyone has contractor horror stories is because they don't have these things in place, right? Like they don't have a clear scope of work. They don't have a contract. They don't have a timeline. They don't have someone out there that's objectively looking at the work, right? And it's good for the contractor too, because the contractor knows on their side, like the money's guaranteed. The money's there. It's sitting in a bank account. I can't tell you how many times growing up, my dad had a project and, he had a customer, he'd finish him the job. He's waiting for that last payment and the guy's just dodging him.
Yeah.
In this case, it's like, no, hey, you call the consultant. Hey, I'm done. I don't know where the owner is, but can you come inspect my work, make sure it's good, make sure we get paid and get closed out. So it protects the contractor too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that. All right. Some follow-up questions. Because I'm curious about the first experience you had. I know you said you made a lot of mistakes on it. I know that if I were looking at doing one of these and I heard 120 days to close, I would be worried about that because I'm worried if I'm under contract, I don't want the seller to walk away and it's hard to convince them to stay under contract that long, right?
Yep.
How long does it take the average? And I'm not talking about these other loans, the average 203K loan to close, would you say?
So it's a
And we'll
loaded,
say that
it's a
they're
load. Yeah.
using they're using your lender.
Oh, yeah.
They're using your guys that are approved. Like you didn't know what you didn't know when you
Yep.
started. Now, if you get a good lender and you got this process nailed down, how long does it take?
30 to 45 days.
That's good. That's good.
And here's an interesting thing. So I worked with I'm partnered with a couple lenders but mostly partnered with one that lends nationally. And there's a girl on their team, a loan officer, and it was funny because she had just got into this and she had done loans previously, just normal retail loans, came into this, did a loan with these guys. It was her first, obviously, with the oversight of the more experienced people in the group. And she was like, like this thing actually is easier to close when you know what you're doing
Yeah.
than a retail loan. And I said, what do you I was actually kind of surprised to hear that, like from someone completely new walking in. I'm like, why? And she said, because on a regular transaction, on a retail transaction, the stuff that takes forever for you to close, the reason why it takes 60, 90 days sometimes is because of the inspection, going back and forth, the things that showed up that the buyer wants fixed and the seller's not willing to do it. And then they wonder what kind of concession, how much concession. Then the appraisal, they're having issues with the appraisal and the house isn't valued at. And now the buyer needs to go out and get more money if they still want the property.
Mm-hmm.
These are all things that the 203K completely disregards. And I don't think we hit on the appraisal thing, but the reason appraisals aren't an issue with 203K loans and renovation loans in general is because they give you the money based on the after renovated value. And what's even crazier with the 203K is because it's your primary residence, they give you an additional 10% on top of the after renovated value. So if you really wanted to, you could over leverage the property 10%. I don't recommend that because I have an investor mindset and I'm looking to build equity, not lose it. But in the situations where they think like, hey, someone's moving into a neighborhood, they really want to make the house the way they want it, they intend on being here 15, 20 years, sure, over leverage it a little bit because over time it'll make up for it. And it's your house. It's yours. Like you want to make it the way you want it. So I always tell people, like, when you place offers with these loans, a lot of people like, oh, sellers won't accept them. I'm like, because you're placing your offers wrong. Just place the offer in a way that would highlight the benefits to the seller. And what you could do, and what I do, what I did on mine was place the offer as is condition, no inspection contingency, meaning you're not going to like nickel and dime them on the inspection. Now, you might have to add it to your loan amount and that might affect your financing, but at the end of the day, like, a bad inspection isn't going to hold up the deal, right? And then waiving the appraisal contingency. Now, these are all just semantics. This is negotiation. Buyers are liars, sellers are worse. You're coming in there, but you're saying you're purchasing the property. They don't have any. There's no condition contingency, no appraisal contingency, no inspection to worry about, and able to close in 30 to 45 days. Any seller is going to like that offer, right? And in many cases, you're able to pay. I tell people, the people that are looking in this, and looking for deals with these 203K loans, you're fishing in what I call the Goldilocks zone, because you're not going with the retail part of the market that's looking for move-in ready. Like when we were talking the house hacking community, you're not, all the house hackers are going for the only FHA financeable multifamilies in their market, and they're squeaky clean, and they're going for way over asking because there's such a demand for it. But then you're also not really where, you're not at a price point where the true flippers and wholesalers are at, because they need a much bigger margin because they're flipping it and they're going to close twice or whatever. They need to put their fee. You're occupying the property, you're putting very little down, and you're getting a very low interest rate. So you're able to kind of fish in this zone where you're able to pay more than your average investor and wholesaler, but you're not playing in the retail market because you're able to attack things that the retail market can't touch.
Yeah, and on the offers, you're checking the FHA box for financing. If they don't like that, that's fine. That's just part of it, right? But
Yeah, that's a great point you talk about. So like again, we're going back into like the negotiation thing. So I'm a
yeah,
big believer in there's no rules in negotiation. And I'm not saying you're lying. I'm not saying you're being dishonest or deceiving, but at the same time, how many times do sellers agents tell you they have multiple offers on the table, multiple cash offers? They're completely BSing. It's a game of poker. And it's a great point that you brought up, checking off the FHA box. Now, every state's different. Some of them don't have that. What I tell people is that, unfortunately, the reality is that there's not enough agents out there that even know what the 203K is. Now, that could be looked at as a benefit. It could be looked at as a deterrent. I think it's a benefit, because at the end of the day, if you have a good agent on your side, they should be able to explain it to them that, again, if it checks off all the boxes, and ultimately you'll hopefully get their seller a much better offer for a better price. But I don't check off FHA. What I do is I just say, right, renovation financing. Because the reality is what financing you actually decide on is going to be between you and your lender at the end of the day. Again, like I told you, there's multiple different options. You can use the choice renovation, Freddie Mac. You can use the Fannie Mae home style. I love how Zoom does this thing, or I think it's my Mac does this thing now where a thumbs up, it like has a little emoji. Um, you could use the home style. You can use FHA. There's you might get into contract on that property, get the inspection back, get all those things back, and it actually might be more cost effective to roll into a choice renovation loan or a Fannie Mae home style or FHA. It doesn't really matter. So again, put your best foot forward on what you think might happen, which is
yeah,
we're putting renovation financing, and that's
yeah.
it.
That makes a lot of
So
sense.
hopefully, yeah, and I'm glad you said that because it's a key point, and I think that it does hang people up, but I think it's really important to just know that, as a way to really negotiate and make sure of this, like, it's not you being dishonest, it's the agent being uninformed most of the time, because they look at
Yeah,
FHA and they immediately think, I can't tell you how many people that I've worked with that told me, oh yeah, our agent said, no, we can't accept the offer because it's FHA. And I'm like, no, it's 203K. You can buy it. And they're like, no, you can't. And it's like, yes, you can. You absolutely can. You just literally have no idea what you're talking about. But that it creates this like ridiculous argument that isn't even worth having, basically.
yeah. Well, I mean, a construction loan the 203K loan is a type of FHA loan. So it is FHA, but then a construction loan is even more accurate as a description because that's what it is as well. And if you put construction loan, like you're saying, it gives you more leeway to go with different programs. So that
Right.
would be more advantageous. Or you could just check the other box and just,
Yeah.
get on the phone and tell them what you're doing, explain it.
Yeah,
You know,
and
I
Fannie
yeah,
Mae and Freddie Mac are considered conventional. So, in many
right,
times, if they're used to seeing conventional, if they do have an offer thing that has check
right.
boxes, I'll just say conventional.
Yeah, if you're going with one of those, yeah, that would totally work as well. And it's not I I would think that in probably 95% of the deals that wouldn't hang anything up. So
Yep, yep.
I'm just curious about this whole thing because I think it's a really smart way to do things.
Yeah, no, I love the
Um,
questions. These are awesome.
what happens if the renovation costs exceed the loan amount?
What happens if the renovation costs exceed the loan? Okay, so are you saying, for example, we
Saying
let
the scope creep that goes on with these renovations and like everything costs more and you decide to change this and that. I'm assuming you just have to come to the table with your own money. Is that
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, to say that that won't happen is, me just, being dishonest, right? Like at
yeah,
the end of the day, no, it's a great point. It absolutely does happen. You have the contingency there, right?
The
So that
10%.
contingency is 10%. Again, on a really big reno, they'll make you do 15%.
Sure.
Once you start going over that, then obviously it has to come out of pocket. Like me and my wife are doing our own property right now. We're paying out of pocket for a bunch of stuff, but it's also our forever home, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it's a different kind of story for us. But but most of the budget is handled by the renovation loan, and
Sure.
kind of we're shelling out on the back end. But for someone that's listening, and they're like, I'm not going to have anything on the back end. Well, that's the whole point of being really clear on the front end. Like this whole process pretty much comes down to that first 30, 60, 90 days. And that means finding a good deal, working with the right team, getting a good contractor under your belt. You get that solved. Everything before closing is really the hard part. After you close, the rest of it really will not run itself, but it'll be a fruit of your labor that you put in the front end of really doing your due diligence. And, one of the ways I really put this down, and this is not just a 203K thing, this is a construction thing. So, renovations in general, we're doing my own renovation on our property. I'm in the business. I've been in the business for years. Well, my dad is, and we had contractors that we thought we were going to use, like different subcontractors. I thought for sure we were going to use. I'm talking guys that I grew up with, like I've known them my whole life. I thought for sure they were going to be the plumber on my job or the electrician on my job. And when I got the bids back, and they were either crazy out of numbers or or they weren't giving me a bid. And it was just like, well, I can't make any good gauge or any good idea on where this is going to be unless I get real clear bids. So even though there was people I thought I was going to use, I went out and shopped out everything, and I made sure to shop out everything.
Yeah.
And um, that's the only way that you're going to be clear on your number. I mean, where everybody messes up with renovating, everybody, is that, especially newbies, because they always think they're the exception to the rule, is people will still consistently go with the lowest bidder every time. And they'll look at 3 bids from contractors, and they'll look at $80,000, $70,000, $50,000, or 80, 70, 80, and 40. And they'll literally think they got a good deal. They'll be like, wow, this guy, and that contractor maybe sold them up and down the river. Yeah, no, I could do this for 40, 50. The reality is the number's the number. Like, there is no one out there that can do it for half. Labor costs labor, materials are materials. Like, that's not a number that wiggles. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of give, but not a lot. And, the whole point of getting multiple bids is so that when you do create this scope of work, that that your numbers that you got are also comparative to what else is out there, because you have instances too. What happens if the contractor walks off the job? What happens if you clash with the contractor walks off? Then what are you going to do? If you have a contractor that walked off that was promising to do it to you for half price, you're going to now have to go find another contractor to do it for what you negotiated the first contractor on. And every contractor is going to be like, yeah, no reason, no wonder why he walked off the job. He gave you a crappy number. So the idea is, like, get 3 to 5 bids. Usually the middle number is the right number in that range, and don't go for the cheap one and expect that you're going to get it done for a fraction of the price. It's going to catch up with you. The more likely thing is they either missed scope or they just underestimated. So when you get multiple bids, you can take an average and then be actually clear on what your cost on your renovation is going to be.
Yeah, I've made that mistake.
We all have.
We all have, of taking the lowest bid, and it ends up burning you because they were cutting corners somehow, or they just didn't know how to bid the job, right?
Bingo. It's one or the
And
other.
then,
You're not
yeah,
lucky. I can't stress it enough.
yeah.
They do not like you. You are not special. That has nothing to do with it. The answer is always one of those things. They missed something. They cut corners too much. They're not licensed. They're not insured. They're just not the contractor you want to use ever.
I think you answered this question a second ago, but I wanted to ask it again because I know there are people watching this that have this question. With the 203K loan, can you do the work yourself as the contractor?
So the FHA guidelines don't really have a direct um I've read it a couple times, and it's very hard to read, but the short answer is no, The long answer is there is no guideline saying you really can't. Here's the thing. The idea here with this, again, at the end of the day, is that the bank wants to protect everything in the mix. And what we'll go back to is still the same adages that we talk about, right? Getting multiple contractor bids and having a clear scope of work, that's not a 203K thing. That is a what everybody should be doing thing, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing applies with construction. A common misconception with people just starting out, because I've seen it. I've seen it multiple times. I'm in the business a long time, and we still struggle through our renovations sometimes, right? Someone that can go in and assume that they can do all the work themselves, it just 9 times out of 10 does not work out. And banks know that. So they could say that they know it. Now, if you are a licensed and insured general contractor, you could show proof of that. This is literally your line of work. There are banks out there that'll let it fly. You have to show, you have to show that. But if you're like, I watched HEDV a couple times, my uncle is a handyman, like, GCing a job is its own skill set. I know a lot of people think a general contractor is like this extra thing that they have to pay for and lose profit on. No, there's an art to GCing a job for sure. And it's a skill set that grows over the years. So again, great question. I know this is a long answer. I'm giving a lot of long answers to stuff, but there's nuance and reason for it, right? And that's always what I like to get clear on people with, like, is because I like to explain it when people are like, oh, I can't do all my own work. Like, oh, that sucks. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's like, it's protecting you. Doing your own work is really not what you think. You're not going to say, again, going back to cost, you're not saving money really doing your own work. Now, you might save a little cost on your labor, but then you're losing your time. And that you have to also know too, what do you value your time at? We're doing it right now in my own house, right? If I'm going to, like, could I go and tile my floor? Yeah. But the reality is it's going to take me 3 weeks to do. I'm going to have to do it nights and weekends, which is taking away from time with my kids, right? It's going to have to be, it's going to happen a little time. I'm probably going to go through way more material because I'm going to mess up a bunch because this is not what I do every day. Or I could pay a tile guy that only does tile. That's what he does. He's in and out in there in 2 or 3 days. I paid the cost for the tile, which I was going to have to pay anyway, and a little bit more in labor, but I saved myself heartache and I saved myself a lot of issues. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, I think it's always like good to relate back to kind of the reasoning behind things,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, before we land the plane and wrap this bad boy up, if you are still with us on this episode, make sure you hit the like so we can get this episode out to more people, make more people aware of the 203K loan and all its benefits. And
Amen.
also subscribe if you're not, because we've got a lot of good episodes coming out in the future, and I want this to help you guys reach financial independence. I want you to be able to use real estate as a piece of that so you can get into doing work you love and not be stuck in these jobs like both of us were, that we weren't crazy.
Yeah.
All right, last two questions. Number one, where can people find out about the 203K loan limits in their area? And the second question I have is, where can people find out how to get connected with a good 203K lender?
Sure. So, first one, just a Google search. Just look up 203K loan limits. It'll bring you to the HUD website. Usually, it goes by county, so you just pick your county, your state and county, and it'll tell you. And it'll say single family, 2 family, 3 family, 4 family. How to find two good 203K loan lenders. Again, the 203kway.com/lender. Those are my lender partners that I have vetted. And I will tell you that took me a long time to do. I've been doing this a long time. There's a lot of lenders out there that also will claim to be good at these and actually still aren't. But the other way to do it as well is that because it's federally backed, there's what we call the 203K endorsement summary. So this is a public document you can access. Again, Google 203K endorsement summary. Go to the top link. It's to the HUD website. It's going to give you a bunch of like months and years. Go to the most recent month and year. It's going to give you this really ugly, but able to look through notepad document of brokerages that or more mortgage banks that have endorsed 203Ks in the last quarter and the last year. And then it also says what the major metro area that is in. So a lot of the big ones will be out there. A lot of the big names that you see out there, the national banks are usually at the top of that. And I used to make that recommendation a lot in the past. The problem with that method now is, like I told you, like the home style, the Fannie Mae products and the Freddie Mac products are actually becoming more and more used just because they're a little more forgiving than the 203K. Again, it really comes down to your finances, and that's something that none of us can answer for you until you work with a lender, because a good renovation lender is going to put you in whatever good product works for you, right? Like
Sure.
when you walk into a car dealership, like you might not know exactly what car you want. You want to test drive them all first, right? So that's kind of what you're going to do. You're going to get a deal. They're going to look at the different loans for your situation, pick the best one for you. But the reason why it's not always the best factor anymore is because it leaves out, just because a lender is not doing a lot of 203Ks doesn't mean they're not doing a lot of home style loans. And it also has a couple different, the idea is like, at the end of the day, and I make this point a lot, and I'll leave it at this, is like, the bank doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be good at 203K loans. You're really looking for the team. It does come down to the team and the loan officer and the broker themselves on whether they know how to do these, because it's a personal thing. There's banks that have better renovation loan programs than others, which is for sure a thing. And that's something to look out for. A big question I'd always like to ask is, do you have a renovation lending department? Do you service your own loans? It's a big one. If they service their own loans, that's huge. Very few banks do that. My lender partners do. But if they service their own loans, it's very important. But also, like, the person you are working with is really at the end of the day at the helm of this whole process. So they need to personally, or their team needs to personally have experience with doing these. Otherwise, like, I'll use a big name like Loan Depot. I mean, it's huge, right? Loan Depot does have a renovation department. And for what I know, it's pretty good. But to think that every mortgage lender, every loan officer that works for Loan Depot is good at 203Ks or renovation loans is completely wrong, right? Like, it's all like personal experience. So focus more on the team, not so much the bank.
Got it. Matt, how can people find out more about you and connect with you?
Sure. So everything started on Instagram for me. When this whole community started, because I was answering so many questions about 203K loans with people. And I asked my wife one day if she thought that I posted on Instagram about it, people would watch it. And she said no, but do it anyway. So I did it anyway. And I'm glad I did it anyway, because it kind of grew into something really cool. And I have a really great community on there. So that's the first place. A Facebook group. So got a free Facebook group. Come in there, ask all your questions. Got a lot of free guides, trainings, all this stuff. My whole basis of creating the 203K way was just to be all the information that I never had when I did my first one. There's just not enough people that know about it. So my whole thing is just to give everybody all the information I wish I had, and make it available to everybody. So those are the two main places. Obviously YouTube too. But yeah, you can find me on any of those, the 203K way, on all the platforms.
Awesome. Matt, thanks so much for this great episode, for sharing all your knowledge, all your experience with us. I know this is going to really benefit people. Folks, go check out Matt on Instagram and connect with him on his different platforms. And this 203K loan sounds interesting to you. This could be a really great way for you to house hack your way into some major equity and get that financial independence momentum that you need, because this works. And you heard Matt's first deal. He put 9,500 bucks in a property and it created 6 figures of equity for him. And he's still rolling that over into more and more deals. So, literally, the name of the game in real estate investing is finding something that works for you and being willing to get in there and push hard enough to get that momentum going and get the ball rolling downhill. And that's what he's done. This is a really great way to get that whole thing started. So, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Share this with your friends. Subscribe and make sure you come back for the next episode. And Matt, man, we'll have you back sometime. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time, buddy.
Would love it. Thanks, Josiah.